Morning, YouTube America. My mobile homeless abode here. Morning's a little nippy out here today, but not too bad. It's Iowa. It's just getting started. Got my little coat. I was fortunate to buy at the local Goodwill for about $10. Actually, a very nice coat, although a little old and I don't know, farmerish for my taste. Uh, what I like to talk about today is let's call it World Building 101. Some basic things that GMs do when they first start out trying to create a place for the people to play and operate in. You know, one of the best things of gaming in general, to my opinion, is this ability to unleash our imagination, to create something that we can put a lot of effort and time into, that feels well realistic as we'd like it to be. Uh, One of the early faux pas or mistakes of most beginning GMs is to, as I said before, to become overly elaborate, to really get in deep and build on this world or this area of this world, and give it so much depth and detail that it bogs down the gameplay, or worse, gets wasted because you never see it. Now, that's not to make it to say that it's not to argue that you couldn't or shouldn't have a decent backstory for the backdrop of your game and for your players and their characters to enjoy. I've learned through experience that if you put down a solid outline or a framework, if you will, of a good backstory, and then allow it to develop and fill in as you go, you develop a much richer world and environment, and your players feel that they've participated in some way, directly or indirectly, in creating the very world that they inhabit. It's easy to mimic our surroundings. I can look at right here and see what the fall in a semi uh, plain, semi wooded environment would look like. Maybe a low urban development. Looking at the fences and the back story here, the backdrop here, and the trees that develop that create the windbreak between the off ramp of the interstate and the spot that I'm parked in. I mean, you kind of can see what I'm talking about there. It gives you a little bit of real world uh, inspiration for your creation. Uh, it's easy to develop that sort of thing. Uh, Populating it, putting dynamics between the populations and the individuals. That's a bit more tougher to do, and you can spend an awful lot of time working on that sort of thing. Uh, it can pay off in the long run. I can tell you that right now. A very good friend of mine, one of my early players of my Stellar Frontiers game, when he went to create it, I asked him to create his house, a little bit of information prior to beginning the game. Give me a list of names of people and their professions, or a little bit of their personalities. And good old Shannon, he created a small novel, a small book unto itself. I think I have that someplace in my storage in my boxes. It contained about 150 different character types, and he went to town. All ages, all professions, all ethnic backgrounds that were pertinent to his aviary characters, his human bird, hybrid genetic species. And at the beginning, I was totally astounded by the amount of stuff, the amount of effort he put in. I mean, I applauded him because, oh my God, most guys, if you ask them, they struggle to come up with a handful of names and almost no background personalities for these individuals. And I, at the time, couldn't envision how I was going to use that kind of a list of stuff. Now, over a decade of novel writing and storylines for games, and that's what we called our interactions. When we played for his house, he was located in a different spot from me, not unlike Play by Mail. We didn't have access to the internet, so we couldn't sit there and play over the video. Uh, so uh, but I utilized that and still utilize that list because it gave me ability to pepper the backstory of his adventures with people that were connected, and there's a connectivity, and I enjoy connectivity. As an experienced GM, experienced world builder, I come to value that. Uh, might go into detail on that at some other point. But going back to the basics of world building, you don't need to have an entire continent design. You could lay it out. You could make a map. Maps are one of the most useful tools you can have. Uh, Several layers of maps is my preference. I'll have the overworld map, the local world map, uh, let's say a geological area of 100 miles in rough diameter, then the local 10-mile map or 1 mile map, or kilometers, depending on what you want to do or what kind of environment you're creating. Uh, and then, of course, the local maps, and those local maps can vary. One of the early mistakes I made was trying to create individual maps for every situation. It's like buildings and things like this. While that's feasible, it takes a lot of time. It's time consuming. Now there's some technology today that, map building, blueprint, CAD stuff for the computers that you can do that'll speed that up. But it's still also wasteful, to be truthful. A clever and, you know, uh, clever method, and one that's used quite frequently by most gaming systems in the last 25 years, is the modular setup. So what you do is you develop a number of generic buildings and just swap what they do. So if I need to have a manor house, I might use 2 or 3, a shop and a couple smaller houses, and just wedge them together. This is this level and that's that level of this house, and just change the environment of what's in it. The area maps and stuff, well, if I'm dealing with combat and I'm using miniatures or markers, and frankly, to be truthful, I enjoy using both, and they're very useful, but they can also be problematic in their own. We'll deal with that some other time. Uh, but creating maps that are interlockable or interchangeable are very useful. You might have a small inventory of 20 or 50 of these things, and just on the fly flop down 2 or 3 of them and slap them together and say, all right, here's the environment your people are in. That's all basic stuff. Computers and stuff make that real easy to do now. It was more time consuming in the old days when we had to do everything by hand. It was also a chance to be artistic and to improve on your artistic skills. And I still highly recommend doing that sort of thing. You can create it yourself, scan it on your computer, and then you could either use it that way or you could print it out on demand, however it's convenient for yourself. You could buy prepackaged systems of that nature. They all are interchangeable. That's another thing to keep in mind, especially if you're a multiple gamer. These guys that have multiple game systems or play in them, or hop from game system to game system over time. If you don't over embellish your maps and your local descriptions, they can be interchangeable to just about any game system. So I don't want to, emphasize the medieval appearance of a map or a town in general from an overview, because that same blueprint could be usable in Shadowrun or Star Wars or 100 other game systems that are either science fiction or fantasy or somewhere in between. And I've played a few of those. Shadowrun's the prime example of one of those in-betweens, where you have both the hack and slash Magic Warrior premise mixed with the neo-future Blade Runner science fiction game. It's a good blend. It's an awesome game system. I have not had the privilege to see the reborn version or the updated version, and this kind of goes back to that THATCO argument. You know, I get it that everybody wants revisions, they want the D20, or they want this, or they want that. And the companies, of course, they're looking for the almighty dollar. They want to make another profit off of the new generation of people or the old generation of nut jobs like myself who keep buying that kind of stuff just because it looks awesome on the shelf. But frankly, now I've got 90% of the original Shadowrun stuff from FASA. It's some beautiful artwork and a beautiful design system. The mechanics are good, but they're not spectacular. And you know, like somebody in a recent video I just seen said, you know, at the end of the day, they're all Dungeons and Dragons. It's the truth. It is what it is. And I've said that myself numerous times. Uh, you need to, you know, pull out the old D&D core books and superimpose the rules over any backdrop you want, any kind of futuristic or ancient game system you want to use, and it's familiar with your players. So there you go. All you got to do is hack out a few things. You know, if you're in the future and you don't use magic, well, magic's got to go. But I'm getting off track on the world building part, but I'll toss this one in. In my game Stellar Frontiers, one of the things that the future holds for humanity, especially in our habit of developing technology and pushing our technology boundaries, is the ability to mimic a lot of effects that we see as magic. You know, what is a fireball? As an example, it's a basic use of magic where, you know, you create an energy force of elemental fire of sorts that's projected and hits a target and explodes, basically, right? Well, in, you know, let's say in Twilight 2000, we call that a rocket launcher. We just put that bitch up on our, excuse my language, put that up on our shoulder, fire it at something, and boom. Okay, fireball, instant. In Stellar Frontiers, we can use technology to create miniature flamethrowers that shoot little balls of concentrated plasma that hit a target. Whoosh, same thing. We can also use and do utilize holographic projectors for the illusionary effects of the same thing. And the startling factors, and we'll get into, I guess, illusions is something that involves a whole nother in a whole nother episode by itself, because that's a lot of love and hate there in illusions, and I haven't seen anybody talking about them, which is doesn't mean it's not there, because by no means have I seen every entry. Like Tsubu's alone, he's probably got thousands of them for all I know. Lots of stuff out there. Good work, guy. You're inspiring, I can tell you that. You know, kind of give me this desire to do this stuff a lot. Anyway, back to World Building 101. The basics is what you want to settle into, especially if you're not used to it. And if you're old hat, you know what I'm talking about. Or maybe you just don't need the basic stuff. Firing from the hip and making it up as you go, well, that's also traditional, but keeping notes and expanding on those. This is where the connectivity of the continuarity, and that's a word I guess I made up myself, of gaming is important, at least to me and to a lot of players, for making a really good long-term campaign viable, is the ability to reuse this stuff. It's like the characters, the NPCs. I want NPCs, well, they come in two categories. The ones I'm going to interact directly with, my character's going to interact with the shopkeeper or the guy at the gate, or this particular weirdo that wandered the woods with a bunch of twigs and leaves hanging out of his beard. You might encounter him one time and then you never see this character again. And for the GM's perspective, that was a moderate amount of work to create this one individual that we don't use again. Well, frankly, I think that's a waste and a shame. You know, if you're operating in a map of an environment you created for your player characters to enjoy, well, why would they not have the opportunity to encounter these same individuals over time? Or in a different campaign with different characters, the same players could be playing in a different campaign on the other side of your 100-mile map with a different set of characters, and had nothing to do with the original game people, but you still can pull out the same NPC and have an encounter with him. or you can adjust him slightly so he fits your new environment as you need it. The other NPCs we often create are these one-shot foes, the bad guys. You're gonna interact with these people. You're gonna kill them, or you're gonna overcome them in some way. Well, a couple of interesting or creative ways of reusing those kinds of characters is I kill this particular thing and it comes back as the undead and hunts me down wants some payback. Or I run into this thing's relative and turns out that he's pretty much the same as his brother-in-law or his cousin was, and I can reuse it with just a slight change of the name or maybe a little differences in your parents. Another wonderful tool is to create a library of these NPCs and not to waste them, because that also holds true, especially with your fact that you can log all this stuff on computers now and create it on the computer. You can easily change out the names and just reuse all the stats and stuff, so it saves time. Now that's a key thing when you're the GM. You really don't have the oodles of time to develop what you'd like, and what you do is valuable. And so the more you can reuse the stuff you're doing, the better off you are. Uh, there's so much that I could discuss and talk about, bringing up on basics of 101, everything from the type of maps and hexes versus squares. You know, I got a little bone to pick with Wizards of the Coast and a few other people on that one. No offense, the old school hex system worked fine. It gave you 6 fronts, and you had a easy to maneuver around. And this square stuff, no. I'm sorry, people, but no, you don't operate in a 9-point square. 11 if you got an up and down. No, nobody works that way. The real world does not work that way. It's more like a hexagon. It's a facing, and facing's important. I don't turn sideways to a corner. I would turn sideways to a new face. So whether we're using a 10-sided hexagon or a 6-sided hexagon, that's up to the player and the maps, of course. But the truth of the matter is the square system, bites the big one, and it was a major mistake, to my opinion. Although I've had some players and some friends who applaud it because they like it, and it's a matter of taste, I guess. But that's a lot for a lot of other stuff, isn't it? Okay, well, I'm getting off on a rant now. We don't want to hear about that, or we can talk about that at another point, another time. Uh, like I said, basic 101 world building, follow the KISS system, and you can't go wrong. Uh, but you know what? From the perspective of the GM who's done it, I've done a lot of things. A few things I should never have done. A lot of things that were a waste of time, and a few things that turned out to be some real gems. Sit down, go off on a tear, build the most elaborate world you can come up with, enjoy it for the sake of creating it, because that in of itself is enjoyable. Even if nobody ever no other player sits down at the table and enjoys it, it doesn't matter, because you got a lot of hours of time spent working and investing and creating this thing. And then over time, by the time you've had your 100th game session, you'll realize that all that elaborate stuff was not necessary unless you're writing a damn novel. And even then, it might not be necessary. On the other hand, you're going to make a source book or a module to sell off to be used for other games, then yeah, you want a lot of that back stuff. We call it fluff. Fluff. fill in the corners with the pretty descriptions and the neopolitics and the religions of the community and their attitudes and all that other stuff. We call it fluff or filler. Awesome stuff. Well, like I said, 101 basic stuff is what it is. We all got to learn how to do it somewhere. So I think we'll bring it into here.